I just finished watching Arcane Season 2, and I tried really hard to love it as much as Season 1. Unfortunately, I have some thoughts about it. Thoughts that I feel could have easily been avoided. Now, it's worth noting that I couldn't give two shits about League of Legends. I don't know anything about the lore. I have played the game because I don't want to be in a match for like 30 minutes while hearing someone call me slurs the whole time. It's just not my thing. So whenever Season 1 was announced, I and many people were like, well, I don't care about League of Legends. And then the show gets glowing reviews from literally everyone and their grandma. Even with all that being said, I still didn't watch the show. Why, you may be asking? I don't know, man, it just seemed really heavy. Honestly, I was right to avoid it at the time because I don't think I would have survived. Then, 3 years later, the second and final season was released, and I still didn't watch it because my Netflix account got hijacked by someone in fucking Florida. But I got my account back and decided, you know what, fuck it, and started watching the show. A show so good, it turns out, that it makes Imagine Dragons sound like a good band. After having finished Season 1, and after hearing what some fans have been saying about the new season, I was cautiously optimistic going into it. And when I was watching it, I was really enjoying it. But by the time the credits rolled in the finale, I thought to myself, okay, but hang on a second. Before we get into why I think Season 2 was a noticeable downgrade, I feel it's important to address what made Season 1 so special in the first place. For starters, I think the characters would draw a lot of people, myself included, into the show. Vi and Jinx are now some of my favorite characters in all of fiction. I am not kidding. Starting off the series with them as kids was such a smart choice, as it allows the audience to grow attached to them and to see just how different everything is a decade later. Vi is older, more hardened, and she is a desperation to finish her quest and find her sister. I don't care if it can never be. She is an awesome person, and she is my soulmate! Seeing the full transformation from Powder to Jinx was both incredibly entertaining and absolutely heartbreaking, as is her strangely endearing dynamic with Silco. Not saying it's a healthy dynamic, but still. Every character was on point. Caitlyn was a great way to show just how unaware the people of Piltover are to Zaun's struggles, and her relationship with Vi was developed incredibly well. Jason Victor's dynamic was fantastic, and was somehow gayer than Vi and Caitlyn. Mel's cunning and careful weaving of the political landscape of Piltover was a breath of fresh air. Echo and Heimerdinger are the goats. You do not need me to tell you why. Marcus was a great foil to Caitlyn to show just how corruption can take hold of someone. And Bessa was a fun little addition towards the end of the season, informing us of why Mel behaves the way she does. But I have to say that Silco was probably the standout of the season, surprisingly. This motherfucker was such a fantastic villain and was a great way to show just how complex the characters in the show can be. Seeing just how willing he was to achieve a free Zaun at the cost of his humanity was invigorating to watch. And this motherfucker was spitting bars the whole time.
But you've grown fat and complacent. Too much time in the sun.
Another thing this show gets right is just how well developed and fleshed out the storylines are. The central storyline of this ongoing feud between Piltover and Zaun, with both sides watching with bated breath for the other to initiate an all-out conflict, was shockingly tense and entertaining. And while the relationship between Vi and Jinx is the heart of the show, the development of Hextech served as a great way to showcase just how much corporate greed can get in the way of just policymaking and genuine entrepreneurial spirit. Jace being forced between appeasing the council with their demands of making Hextech weaponry before Zaun can, and helping Victor achieve their dream of helping those in need with their technology was great and extremely well handled. All of these storylines coming to a head with Jinx killing Silco, embracing her full transformation, and blowing up the council meeting was a fantastic way to end the season off on. Jinx's actions causing the first fight in an all-out civil war was the perfect cliffhanger. Alright, so how do they fuck it up?
Hi, post-production me here. When I recorded these next few sections, I didn't realize just how mean-spirited they sounded. I just want to make it very clear from the top that I do like this show, and I really like these characters and this story. While I do agree with the criticisms I make, how I say them is more for the purpose of content rather than me actually feeling this aggressive about it. Except for one of the points that I make. You'll get to it. I say this, so if you do like this show, just keep that in mind. Alright, thank you.
I've seen a lot of people say that this final season ruins the characters, and as someone who both likes and criticizes this season, I think they're being a tad bit hyperbolic. I don't think there were any characters that were outright assassinated this season. What I do think is the problem, however, is the amount of new characterization actually given. Victor's probably the only character I would say was assassinated maybe. But that's largely at the end of the show when his quest for total unity kinda came out of fucking nowhere. Echo gets a good arc, but it's shoved to the back half of the season, so it doesn't really have time to properly sit with the audience. Mel's whole subplot has very little bearing on the story. We'll get to that later, don't worry. Jace has virtually no screen time, and Heimerdinger might as well not have been in the fucking show with how little he gets to do. The only main characters that get enough screen time this season are Jinx, Vi, and Caitlyn, and even then, only one of them gets anything meaty out of it. Caitlyn kind of gets an arc this season. Seeing her increasingly violent methods in her search for Jinx was really interesting, but they're almost entirely shown in montages. So by the time she switches back to the good side halfway through, almost all of her development wasn't shown, so it feels a little hollow. We see a lot of the violent and unethical actions taken in season 1, so when characters like Echo tell Vi that Powder is no longer a good person, we as an audience can go, yeah, she's really shitty. So when Caitlyn talks about the awful things she's done, I'm sorry, I really can't buy it, because all of it was shown in an artistic, but uninforming montage. Speaking of Jinx, she is perhaps the only character this season that gets anything to do at all. It makes sense considering just how popular both before and after season 1 Jinx is as a character in League, but it feels like they gave her too much time. If your name isn't Jinx, you basically do not exist in this season. Seeing her growing and understanding of Vi through her relationship with Isha was well done. The whole shit with Warwick was fucking dumb, but don't worry, I'll get to it. Her realization in the jail cell of how violence begets violence was incredibly heartbreaking, as it unfortunately led her to the conclusion that there is no good version of herself left, and decides to try and take her own life, before Echo swoops in, like the fucking Chad that he is, to tell her that that's not the case. All of that's well and good, but then her final scene happens. It feels weird that a character who had these self-destructive tendencies like this since season 1 ends her character arc by sacrificing herself for Vi. I've seen people say that this is a good ending because it's implied that Jinx got out by sneaking out of the vents onto one of the ships, but Vi still thinks she's dead, so all she did was give her more trauma than anything else. It's not the worst way they could have resolved it, but considering that there's a trend of characters who have these thoughts ending their arc by effectively doing the thing we're told they shouldn't do, it's certainly a choice. Oh, also, just as an aside and a nitpick, they kind of forgot how Jinx's psychosis works in season 1 and makes her seem less crazed and more like a quippy asshole, but that's just kind of annoying. But by far, the most egregious character writing this season was Vi. Vi gets absolutely nothing to do this entire season. And mind you, that this season is the last one. It's fine if you think this season is as great as season 1, that's fine. I still think it's pretty damn good, but I've seen so many people try and convince me that Vi's character this season is actually just misunderstood and gets development. I'm sorry, but this is where I draw the line. At least the other characters advance the plot. Vi exists solely to fuel Jinx and Caitlyn's character arcs. Her becoming more and more self-hating and isolated after her failure with both arresting Jinx and her failed relationship with Caitlyn makes sense, but we only ever get to see her doing this, you guessed it, in a fucking montage. After that, she is immediately ushered to the next available plot point. Again, I'm not mad that she acts differently than she does in season 1. No one is fucking saying that. Get your straw man out of my face. What I am saying is that it wasn't fleshed out at all. Even her scene with Caitlyn felt rushed because yeah, it says being Lex and all of that. Awesome, sure. But the moment didn't feel earned because Vi didn't have anything meaningful with Caitlyn this season up until this point. This isn't me trying to be a Debbie Downer or anything. I was genuinely looking forward to the scene for reasons, but it falls flat when one of the main characters doesn't get anything meaningful with either Caitlyn or Jinx. Don't worry, I'll get to that soon. I just truly don't understand why they took one of the main characters, the best character in my opinion, and just gave her nothing. It truly befuddles me. Stop giving characters montages. I need to see them making character-based choices. I need to calm down. I need to calm down. I'm gonna try and keep this section brief relative to the last one, but to surmise my issues with the storylines this season in a word would be underdeveloped. Let's take a look at the same arcs that we start with in season 1. Starting with the sisters, I think their reasoning for joining up together feels incredibly forced. I think the idea that the beast that Dr. Revek makes, whose goals get accomplished off screen by the way, so fucking hats off I guess. Anyways, the beast that he makes being a resurrected Vanderwolf hybrid doesn't have the same feel as it should, because instead of Jinx and Vi reuniting for any character-based motivations or reasons, it feels more like an obligation, like an excuse to get these characters in the same room. And when they do eventually start looking for him, the two argue more like annoyed siblings rather than two individuals who have deep-rooted childhood trauma that needs to be aired. Maybe that's the point, but it feels like as if they decided to brush their dynamic under the rug in service of a less interesting narrative. Speaking of less interesting narratives, Mel's imprisonment and subsequent understanding of like the Black Rose was incredibly disconnected from the rest of the narrative. It did end up being used in the finale a little bit, but the intention of the plot point clearly was to set up future shows like the rumored Noxus one. That's all I have to say about it. I really didn't care for it. The Piltover Zahn conflict was also, again, swept under the rug in service of having the two sides side against Victor and Mbessa and their forces. While I understand wanting to show how a common enemy can unite people, again, there are deep-rooted issues between Piltover and Zahn that the writers just decided to ignore in making this the central narrative. While we're on the topic, why did the Hextech arc become the central arc tying everything together? That is not what the show was building towards. The class divide was the central storyline, so randomly shifting to dealing with Noxus and whatever the fuck Victor has going on just kind of takes the wind out of the story's sails. But that's not bad on its own, right? With the exception of whatever Vi did to piss off the writers, all of these things are forgivable and can certainly work in a story, if not for one factor. A factor so big that it exacerbates each of these issues that I have about this season. Surprise, surprise, no one would have guessed that my problem with this season is the problem literally everyone else has with this season. I should start this section off by saying that I don't actually have many issues with the first 4 episodes of this season. Sure, I would have liked to have seen the effects of Caitlyn's squad using chemical warfare on Zahn and the inhabitants of it, but I digress. Still, the show was going really well, even after the short little time skip at the beginning of episode 4, which again, I would have loved to have seen how declaring martial law affected the people of both Piltover and Zahn. I thought the show was doing great. It wasn't until episode 5 onward that I realized, holy shit, this half is extremely rushed. In interviews, the team behind the show stated that this series was always intended to be a 2-season affair, and that they feared they would be stretching the plot too thin by having more. After having seen the show in full, I feel like they massively overcorrected. It feels as though the writers already had an ending in mind and bent the story to reach that point, because it feels more like a foregone conclusion rather than naturally leading to one. One of the best parts about the first season was how every action has a consequence to it, and the characters were given space to appropriately react and experience those consequences. Both Act 2 and 3 of this season, however, do not let off the gas at all, giving the audience no room to breathe and address what the fuck just happened. Mel doesn't even get to grieve Jace's potential demise because the show just wants to wrap everything up as quickly as possible. The only time this season where this isn't the case is with episode 7, which many people tout is the best episode of the show. And I can see why people would say that. Those French fuckers can make a good song. People love this episode because it actually slows it the fuck down and lets us breathe and digest the events of the show. I also find it incredibly funny that while Echo and Heimerdinger are out here living their best lives, Jace is stuck in a fucking Dark Souls speedrun. Echo probably is the best arc of the season, but the second the episode is over, it's right back to fucking Sonic the Hedgehog speed as Heimerdinger's sacrifice isn't brought up a single time, minus this shit at the end with a fucking paper. That's it. If what they're saying is true, and that this structure was how the series was always intended to be, I find it hard to believe that this is the way in which you'd want to tell that story. It feels like a 3-season show crammed into 2, and that's really the only problem standing in their way. It feels more like they had 3 seasons worth of ideas, but either Riot or Netflix told them to wrap it up in 2. But if their intention was to take these inconclusive arcs and place them into a new series, I ask, why? Why not just make a 3rd season? Because they clearly bit off more than they could chew with how much time they had to tell it. Now, despite the fact that I ranted like a madman for the past 7 or so minutes, it may shock you to learn that I actually like this season. So, in the spirit of fairness, I'm going to talk about the things that I liked about this season. Firstly, it should be no surprise that the animation in this show is on another fucking level. Like, above Spider-Verse levels of good. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I think it's true. The first season already had exemplary visuals, but this season took the ball and ran with it as far as it could. There's some high concept shit on display here that looks so damn good that I can't help but feel as giddy as when Jace gets a text from Victor late at night. The montages, while I think the volume of them is rather irritating, display just how far you can go with the medium of animation, because these sequences visually kick ass. Speaking of the montages, the music in this show, the music is so good. Season 1 already had fantastic music. Dynasties and Dystopias and Guns for Hire are certified bangers, but Season 2 had some shit cooking, don't let it slouch. Cocktail Molotov has me feeling like I, myself, am going through a trauma-induced identity crisis. Spin the Wheel is such a fun little ditty, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. Paint the Town Blue is a great way to demonstrate just how intense Caitlyn's search for Jinx became over the past few months. The line is so good that it helped remind me that 21 Pilots is an actual good band, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'll say it again, these French fuckers can sing. To surmise it a tad, the presentation of the show was and always will be phenomenal. Secondly, despite my issues with the pacing of the show, the writing and the dialogue of the show is still top tier. While I take issue with how we get to this point, the characters themselves are still incredibly well written. Jinx's whole talk with imaginary Silco about breaking the cycle was filled with some absolutely fantastic dialogue. Even Vi, a character that I have expressed heavy disappointment with this season, still gets moments in the script to showcase her character. I just really wish we saw more of her. And that's really the gripe that holds all of my criticisms up on its shoulders. If we just had more time with these characters and these themes, this video would have been a lot more positive. Except for the Vander Warwick stuff, I still think it's kind of dumb. If people's biggest complaint boils down to we want more, then that means what we got was still really good. But that doesn't mean we should just avoid discussing its faults either, just because it's one of our favorite shows. Because discussing it is how good art becomes great art.
Hi, post-production me here. Again, one of the things I forgot to add in this section of the stuff that I like were the performances across both seasons, and particularly this one. The cast acts their ass off, and they really did not need to go this hard, but it's fantastic that they did. Obviously, Haley Steinfeld as Vi, Katie Lee Young as Caitlin, Harry Lloyd as Victor, Kevin Alejandro as Jace, Ellen Thomas as Ambessa, Tox Olagundoy as Mel was fantastic, I think I said her name right, and Jason Spiesiak, the GOAT, of course, did a great job. But by far, the best actress in this whole thing, in my opinion, is Ella Purnell. Holy shit. Her first scene, where she talks with Silco.
I know. Sisters, right? Can't live with them, can't stuff them back in the old baby maker.
Just made me want to fucking swaddle her with a blanket and tell her everything's alright. I felt so bad for her. If you were to tell me that this was her first voice acting performance, I wouldn't believe you, because I don't know how she's able to pull it off. Anyways, okay, on to the conclusion.
I just want to reiterate, I'm not trying to say these things to be a pedantic asshole. As you just heard, I still liked and enjoyed the season overall. It's still really good. I just don't understand why this was the avenue they decided to take. If they really want to have some things open-ended for other shows, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But I don't want Jinx in a show without Vi, or Vi in a show without Jinx. Their whole dynamic, their story, is why I watched the show in the first place. If you want to conclude their arcs fully, why not have them concluded together? Some people may like the idea of having expanded universes for these characters, and I'm not against it. But as we all know, this show still didn't generate enough revenue on the gaming side of things, so this feels like a strange move. I, like many people who watched it, are fans of Arcane. Not League of Legends, not Legends of Runeterra, not, I don't know, fucking Teamfight Tactics or whatever, but a fan of Arcane. I'm here to watch a story, not a product. A story with some sort of conclusion, whether that conclusion makes me feel good or not. And if this truly is the last time we see characters like Jinx and Vi together, then we're not gonna get that. Anyways, thanks for watching. Time to write a Vi X self-insert AU.